Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant, John Solleder. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
And there we are. So it is my pleasure to introduce another great friend of mine in the industry for many, many years. Laura Evans, how are you today?
Oh, John, I'm doing so well. Thank you so much.
And, Laura, you have such an amazing story, and it's so different than a lot of people that I interview that started like I did, as at some point, as a distributor, and maybe did some corporate along the way, but you kind of started the opposite way. But share with everyone, if you would, kind of your introduction and some of the things you've been doing over the last number of years.
Sure. Well, my very, very first experience with this industry was I wanted to save on some products as a college student, and I wanted to save on some skincare and beauty products. So my hairstylist told me about it, and I became a distributor for a company just to save some money. I really never built anything, but that was my first introduction. And many years later, out of college and in my career, after having worked at J. Crew and Disney on the sales and marketing side, I had an opportunity to work at a party plan company and really lead their customer experience and also their sales and marketing areas. So that was my first experience, which led me to a job offer for a $1 billion company in this industry on the telecom side. And then that led me to run as a president, a $1 billion nutrition company in this industry. So I definitely have more of the corporate background and appreciation for what it takes to run a company, but also I have an appreciation for the legitimacy of this business model. And I'm just an outspoken advocate that this is a credible business. You've got great people, you've got great products, and you've got good companies that are behind this business model. And I love being a part of that. 7 years ago, I left my corporate career. I retired at what most people consider young, and just decided that I wanted the freedom and the flexibility that I'd been promoting and teaching for so many years. So I walked away from my corporate job and became a field distributor full time. And I've been doing that for the last 7 years.
Wow, great. Yeah, it is so different than, most people, they start field, they end up corporate at some point. You kind of did the reverse, and you did a great job with both those companies that I'm familiar with as well. So my compliments, and my further compliments for, now my corporate friends are going to get mad at me, but seeing the light that our side of the thing's a lot better.
Yes.
I wouldn't say easier. I would say better in terms of that flexibility, because as we both know, when that growth happens, you work more corporate. When it happens as a distributor, you go, hey, my check went up and I did the same stuff, So,
that's right.
Absolutely. So, well, great. You have an amazing perspective. And one of the things that's happened over the last couple of years is I've started to do a lot of writing, which was my first love. I went to school to be a journalist way back when I got introduced to the industry, because I couldn't find a job as a journalist. So here now I can afford to be a journalist because I don't have to make a living from it, thank God. But I know you've just kind of been introduced to our latest book called Leave Nothing to Chance.
Yes.
And there's 15 principles in there. I'm sure there's a few of them that probably, got your attention, but what one in particular would you like to mention and talk about a little bit?
Well, oh my goodness, John, I love that you're producing content like that is people can, read and apply right away. And that's the most important thing I find in the learning cycle, is that you learn something and then you use it right away. And for me, the one that I just have to come back to that kind of forms for me all else is about having the right mindset. Mindset is so important. I see over and over again that I could teach two people the exact same thing, the exact same compensation, the exact same, scripts, the exact same approaches, and one gets better results than the other one does. And why is that? It always comes back to mindset. And it's so important that we protect our mindset and that we nourish our mindset with positive affirmations. I love to do strategic planning. I mean, you can take a girl out of corporate, but you can't take corporate out of me. So I love to sit down and do strategic planning on what is your team going to look like when you are earning that amount of money that you want to earn. And then let's walk it back on what needs to be true for that to happen. If you really can't see it in your mind is not going to work for you. It's going to be working against you, because we just are surrounded by so many negative influences and so much discouragement and so much negative self-talk that it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're you or whether you're me or who you are. We all have our own battles to fight in our mind and that's the difference, that people that are successful win that. They've got the right mindset and they know how to continue to nourish that mindset.
Wow. Great point. So somewhere along the line, whether it was college when you first looked at the industry as a kid, basically, or maybe it was earlier than that, or maybe it was as you got into the industry, corporate world, et cetera, I'm sure somewhere there was that Galileo moment, so to speak, right? That eye-opening moment where somebody put a book in your hand. Where maybe I was kidding somebody the other day, so maybe you've tripped across it. You know what I mean? Because some people did. Some people, they found books, and I don't even know how I found it. So what was the first one in your life that really had an impact?
Oh, I know right away. It was Anthony Robbins. And I don't even remember actually, maybe Awakening the Giant from Within, was it? But for me, it was cassette tapes. I mean, that's my age. And it wasn't a book, it was an audio tape. And what I loved about it was I did a lot of driving, and I also did a lot of work setting up displays at J. Crew. And I was able to put in a cassette recorder and listen to this positivity and this power of thinking over and over and over again. And it was a game changer for me. I have a great story about how I met Tony Robbins many years later, but that is definitely the one that made a big difference for me.
Wow. Tell me about how you met Tony.
Well, a mutual friend of ours was flying into Dallas to meet with me and work on some business. And when I went to the airport to pick him up from his private plane, I saw a couple of other people get off the plane. And I'm like, what the heck? Did he bring all of his attorneys with him or what? We were just going to have a simple conversation and he lawyered up or something. And as they approached, sure enough, it was Tony Robbins and his assistant, who also happened to be friends with my friend that I didn't realize. And guess what was in my CD player in the car? I'd upgraded since then. Guess what was in my CD player? It was one of Tony Robbins' most recent releases. And I mean, I couldn't make this stuff up. So I total fangirled with Tony and said, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe I'm listening to you right now. And your work has made such a difference for me. And he was so gracious and nice and asked me for my business card. And then as a surprise, about 2 weeks later, I got this huge box from his office with a handwritten note from him with everything he'd ever done before, telling me how nice it was to meet me and how much he loved that I loved his work.
Wow. One thing Tony says that always resonates with me amongst many things he says is that the past does not equal the future. And, that's such an image thing, especially, with what the country's been through, what the world's been through the last year, certainly. So big fan of Tony's as well, Laura. So let's go a little further. Let's do a deep dive. I know you've read obviously tons of stuff. You've listened to tons of stuff, right? You can't be as successful as you've been without surrounding yourself with all of the classics and maybe the non-classics. So if you had to whittle it down, if you're on a deserted island and they said you could only bring 3 books with you, what are they?
Oh my goodness, John, that is tough because I love to read and I love to listen. I'm a huge fan of Audible these days because I'm a dog mom and I walk my dogs a lot and I just listen to books and I can speed it up. I can listen at 1.5 speed. So, I mean, it's not unusual for me to listen to 12 books a year. And I love that it's nurturing for me. It's like food, it's nurturing. I would say if I was on a deserted island, one of the ones that has to come to mind for me, although I'm going to confess, the first time I ever read this book all the way through was 2 years ago, but that's the Bible. And I enjoy the principles of life and business that I learn that are biblically based. So that would be number one. The second one would probably be, I was going to say How to Win Friends and Influence People, but if I'm on a deserted island, that one doesn't matter that much, I guess. But that's a top one for me. So I guess my next one would be, and I'm going to say this, and I know there might be different opinions about it, but this book really impacted me when I read this book, which was many years ago. I read the book by Rudy Giuliani called Leadership, about when he was governor or mayor or whatever of New York. And what I loved about that book was how he managed by the numbers, not by the feelings. And that spoke so much to me as a leader and as someone that, runs companies, because a lot of times the way people feel about things can be very loud, but the numbers tell a different story. And you got to go with, you got to have a balance, but you got to back up what it is that you're feeling. It may not be correct. So that made a big difference for me. The other book that I guess I would have to say, I read recently, and I just really, there's two of them I read recently. One's called Be the Light. And another one is called Sacred Pace. Mm-hmm. And Sacred Pace is a businessman, I think in Texas, and he just talks about how he re-engineered his life to have more of a sacred pace in making his decisions. And it's just really awesome read. So.
Wow. Sounds like it. I'll have to take a look at that. Sounds like my kind of book. So let's do a little segue here to building a distributorship. You've been back in the field, or back in first time, I guess, really in the field for 7 years, as you said earlier. You have a ton of experience, obviously, running $2 billion network marketing companies. So you've certainly seen some really good people, in the field. Certainly, I'm sure you've learned from them as well. But how do you start a new distributor? And whether you want to take that from, a 24-hour plan, a 48-hour plan, a 1-week plan, a 1-month plan, a 1-quarter plan, however you want to take it, whatever you feel would be the best advice to a new person, time frame it however you want, and the activities necessary to succeed.
Yeah, there's a tactical approach where I make sure that they know the tools and the resources that are available to them in the business and in the company, whether it's downloading an app or, those kinds of things, the tactical things. But the part I love to do is the strategic part. And I love to have a conversation with them about, what if this does work? Why are they interested in doing this? What got them interested and what that can look like? And with every person, it varies. Sometimes people are like, I'm going to make $10,000 a month, right away. I'm going to be a 6-figure earner. And that's where their head's at. And then sometimes other people are like, I don't know, maybe just cover the price of my products or the cost of my products. But what we do is we bridge that gap. I help them think a little bit further beyond. If they're thinking small, I help them think big. And if they're thinking big, I help them walk it back into what is that going to look like? So when you are there, what are you going to do with that? And that's an important part of that strategic conversation, is getting connected, what they're going to do and how they're going to feel and what it's going to be like when they reach those goals and those milestones, because that emotional connection provides that stickiness for that surviving some of the setbacks that they're going to encounter, which every entrepreneur of every type of business encounters. So I really like to uncover that with them. And then I like to reinforce it. I like to send them a card or a note or a picture or something that was related to what they're talking about that they want to get to serve as a reminder for them and help them. Like I said, I usually do it like a maybe 3 to 5 year look, 1 year, and then next 90 days and this 30 days, and then the next 48 hours. I kind of walk it back like that with them in a strategic plan.
Great. Yeah, and it makes sense too, because they can dream. Dreaming is easy, as we both know, right? Oh yeah, I can think 5 years from now, but 5 minutes from now, wow, now you mean I have to do something for 5 years to happen. So that's a great way to do it. So let's go a little bit further on this question. This is something I've been asking a lot of leaders in our industry. As we kind of hopefully, to quote Jim Rohn, right? Spring follows winter, and hopefully as a world, we're getting to springtime, not only, physically on the calendar, but metaphorically. So along those lines, Laura, I noticed two groups of people that are looking at our industry in a big way right now. And I'll describe them. I'd like your reaction to this. One group is the people, let's call them the 60-year-old group. They could be 50, they could be 70, they could be, anywhere in that age range. And perhaps they've been business owners. Perhaps they've been worked for somebody who owned a business, right? Perhaps they've been in sales. They've been in some sort of sales, like the travel industry, for example. Right now, it's been very heavily hit, obviously, by the pandemic. And there's other industries, certainly others, unfortunately. Wish there wasn't, but there certainly are. So we've got that group of people, right, who are a little bit older, and maybe they always poo-pooed network marketing. They always thought that's not for me, or it's a pyramid, or blah, 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 blah. And now all of a sudden they're going, hey, even if I'm going back to whatever I did previously, maybe the business, because the technology is going to be cut in half. Maybe it's just going to be cut in half because there's just not as much foot traffic, depending on what it is. Let's flip that around. There's this other group of people. And I know you've got kids here. I know in Dallas, I don't know all the ages, but I know I've got a 25, a 17, and a 16, for example. Mm-hmm. And when I look at that 25-year-old group as a group, they're very similar to that 60-year-old group outside of the fact they don't have the gray hair yet, right? But what they do have that the 60-year-old group may not have as well is all those technology skills, right? Every one of them knows how to take an iPhone, and they can launch the space shuttle with it, right? They know every application on it. I wonder at half the stuff on my phone is personally, because I'm in that 60-year-old group. But having said that, that's a whole nother group with some similarities, with some differences, obviously. But what would your advice be? Now, you've run $2 billion companies in this space. You've been a lead distributor now in the company that you're currently in. You know this business as well as anybody on the planet. What's your advice to those two groups of people? If you had a 60-year-old and a 25-year-old sitting in your office right now, what are you going to tell them about this industry that they don't know and that they need to know going forward?
Wow, you are a journalist, John. You ask some really good questions. You probably don't know this, but I studied journalism too. I thought that's what I wanted to do as well. And ended up being actually a college dropout because my career was going so much faster than the journalism opportunities were that I leaned more towards that. And what you reminded me of in that question is actually on a podcast that I'm leading these days called MLM You Decide, which is all about the good and misunderstood of network marketing. We had a discussion just like this. We brought in 5 generations and talked to them about what their impressions were, what their thoughts were, and how they would approach building a network marketing business. And it was really eye-opening for me because I guess I sort of came at it thinking, I know where I am in my generation, but I made some assumptions about the other generations. And what I left that conversation with is how much we were all the same, how much we were all the same. And in terms of, for all of the span of the 5 generations, from the 60-year-olds to the 20-year-olds that we covered 60, 50, 40, 30, 20. From that whole range, belief was the core thing that mattered. Of did they believe in themselves? And that's what the young people actually struggled with. They knew all the technology stuff, but they struggled with their belief and what other people would think about them. And the folks that were more experienced, more mature in life, they didn't know the technology stuff, but they just didn't have the confidence and the belief in themselves that they could really do something that would work because they were jaded. They were cynics. They'd seen so much, lived so much, and their belief had just eroded to be not a positive one. And it wasn't as much about the industry as it was about themselves. So what we talked about, and what we've also been doing, is we've been interviewing restaurateurs, nurses, people that are retiring or have retired. Some already had a backup plan happening and some didn't. And we've been sharing those stories. And that is what I would tell both of these groups. I would tell both of these groups, hey, listen, we all need multiple sources of income. Having multiple streams of income is critical. And you can learn this, you can do this, and you can do it in a way that attracts the market that is you. You know, when you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. Just be in your lane, be who you are, what you like. If you're 20 and you want to do only TikTok, do you. If you are 60 and you only want to do Zoom calls, or you want to get together with people in person, then do you. There is a place for both of that. But the important thing is don't wait on the sidelines. Because one of our interviews, one of the restaurateur guys said, who is so thankful that he had started a business in network marketing space, because ultimately he had to shut down his restaurant this year because the hospitality industry has been hit so badly. And he said that he really believes that network marketing is going to be a critical element of economic recovery from the situation that we're going through. And you think about it, we are an at-home business. Mm-hmm. We are a business that you can do online. We are about connection and community, which people are feeling isolated and alone, and they don't know where to turn or what to do. We are that connector part, and we have great products and great plans and great people. So that's what I would say is, for our survival, we have to have multiple sources of income. Gone are the days where you lock in at, one thing and you're only doing one thing forever. And there's a lot of different ways to have multiple sources of incomes, from some affiliate marketing with Amazon or whatever, to a multi-level marketing company, to maybe some kind of a side job, to selling crafts or whatever, but just have a couple of different streams of income. And what I like is that the younger people are very open to that. In the whole gig economy, they're totally down for that. They don't trust that any one company is going to be around for them forever, and they're okay earning from different sources, different types of income. And I think that for folks that are a little bit older, they are realizing that their retirement may not be what they thought it was going to be. And for them, having some additional source of income, even if it were just, the stats the last time we had a recession were that with $400 more a month, a family that went into foreclosure could have avoided that. So, I mean, seriously, you can create that kind of income with part-time effort as you learn some new skills in this industry, and you're not going to do it alone. You're going to have great support in doing it. So I think, did that answer your question?
It absolutely did. The only thing I'll add to that, because it was what you said was brilliant, makes total sense, totally resonates with both of those groups, all of those groups that you mentioned, from 20 right up to probably 80, because everything's a question mark right now, but if you think about it, we've just gone through here, big argument in Congress, right? Was it $1,500 a month they were going to give? Was it $1,600? Was it $2,000? Was it less? And why we pay these people in Congress is beyond me, but that's another podcast. But at the end of the day, when you think about it, the point you just made, right? That $400, right, in the last major recession 20, 25 years ago, today is probably about $1,500, $1,600 a month, give or take, right? Yeah. And whatever the pay plan is, as long as it's a legitimate company with a legitimate pay plan and obviously a good product, people can make that in our industry on a part-time basis. They don't have to leave whatever it is they did before. Maybe they were a great school teacher and they want to continue to teach, or maybe they were great whatever, right? They should certainly continue that, but they can do that. And so what you just said there, crystal clear. So let's go a little bit further on that. We're at a time where, the world has changed, right? The pandemic has changed it. There's been all sorts of different things that have happened in the world over the last, number of years. When you go back to where you started, like you mentioned cassettes before, for example, and I'll tell you a funny one real quick here. When I first started with the company I'm currently with 25 years ago, I did a cassette tape because I was leaving another company. I had to explain why without slandering the former company. And I had to explain why and blah, blah, blah. My son found that. And I had just bought him a 1991 Mercedes 190E, right? And very few left, by the way, which is interesting. But it's got a cassette player. So he found the cassette and he stuck it in the car, the cassette player. And he said, "Oh, now I know how this thing works." And I was like, "Well, that's interesting. Listen to the cassette now," right? But to that point, Laura, you've seen a lot. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. But how is technology? Here's the question on this: how is technology? Just what we're on now, Zoom as one of many examples. We got Zoom, we got WhatsApp, we got all these different things that didn't exist when we started. How have those things changed the ease of you being able, especially during this time frame, right, with the pandemic, to be able to build a business right from your home there in Charleston, okay, without having to leave, without having to put yourself at risk or anybody else? How have these things changed? And what are the top technologies that you personally use?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm glad that we began embracing using technology from a business standpoint. So for me, I didn't have a learning curve because I was already using all of those in my business for the last few years. And Zoom, certainly, because it's given me the connectivity. We can see people, we can't touch people, but we can see them, we can hear them. And I've used it for everything from a high school reunion that I organized to a girls' happy hour, to family birthdays across the country, to business meetings and business celebrations and team meetings. And you can really have a lot of fun with it. It doesn't have to be, all business. It can be fun. And I'm so thankful. And I've been able to keep the recordings and repurpose the recordings or share them. And that's been wonderful. So I use Zoom quite a bit. I'm trying to think what other technologies I use. Well, I'm using Anchor with the podcast, and I use obviously phones, and we've got apps that we use quite a bit in being able to share resources. Very active on all the social media platforms, in particular Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and that connectivity has been wonderful as well. So I guess those are the things that, is the way my business has evolved. Those are the things I'm using and what I'm doing. I've used Easy Webinar a little bit to do some webinars and then record them so that they're available. They have an evergreen availability for folks. So those are the things.
Wow, great. So in wrapping up, so we've talked about advice to new people. We've talked about advice a little bit, I guess, to existing people. But here we are in this industry for all of these many, many years, right? That we've both been blessed to be in it and have it be part of our lives and our families' lives and everything else. But what's your advice for people going forward in terms of right now, them being in the right mental zone, the right positive attitude going forward with every curveball that we've been thrown the last year or so, right? The pandemic, recently in Texas, of course, the problems there, similar things happening around the country, right? All the things that have happened, all the life things that have happened, right? While we're building a business. This business has been such a beacon of leadership to so many people and the amazing growth that's happening right now. But your advice, your sage advice, you ran 2 big companies. You've been a successful distributor. You've been involved. You've been a difference maker in the industry for a long time. What's your advice to those people maybe that are in the industry that aren't really sold on the industry? And then you know what I mean by that is the people who they're here, they show up to everything, they listen to everything, but they're not active the way that we know that they need to be to have the same type of results that you've had. So your advice to those folks in closing.
It's never too late to begin again. Enjoy being a beginner. I recently got a Peloton bike, and I'm a beginner on learning how to use it, the shoes, the programs, everything. And it reminded me of what it's like to be a beginner. And I say that because it doesn't have to be the new year for you to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, what's done is done. What happened yesterday ended at midnight, as John Maxwell says. And I'm responsible for what's going to happen for the future, and to just, draw that line in the sand and start over and skill up. If you're lacking confidence, read some things, listen to some things. There are so many wonderful resources like John's books. There's so many different resources like our podcast, but there's just many, and your sponsor, your support team can recommend them. But read, skill up, and that's going to help with your confidence. And find that people might say, I don't have time. Well, I can for sure tell you, I don't watch any news. I guard the negativity around me, and I limit it to, bites of local news, or where I can skim what's happening in the world. I'm not oblivious to what's happening in the world, but I don't let it control me. I control it. I control what I'm going to spend and how much time and energy I'm going to give to it. And then I fill all my other time with skilling up and with learning how to do more, do better, and learning more about how to serve others.
Wow. Great. So all leaders are readers. I know you agree with that. That's something you just touched on again, but comment on that comment if you would. I know it's been around long before us, and it'll be around long after us, but all leaders are readers, and it works the other way. Of course, all readers are leaders, right? So why is that?
Well, I believe that it takes initiative to pick up a book and learn something new. It takes initiative, creativity, motivation to say, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to do something. Whether you're learning about how to play tennis, or whether you're learning about traveling in another country, or, whether you're learning self-help, or whether you're reading a romance story or whatever, you are learning about something else that's not something you've currently experienced. And I think it takes a little bit of, initiative to do that. Plus, when you learn, you do skill up. When you read, you expand your vocabulary. You also expand your thinking. One of the books I'm reading right now is So You Want to Talk About Race. And I'm really enjoying that book because it comes at it from an angle that I don't have a perspective on, because it's not my background and it's not my experience. So I enjoy reading books that take me outside of what my experience has been, so that I can appreciate others and serve others better. And that's why I believe leaders are readers, because leaders don't wait to be told what to do. They take the initiative to do it, but then they learn something that changes them, and they apply it. No matter how subtle it is, they learn something that changes them and they apply it.
That was going to be my last question to you, is what you're reading right now. And, you just used a perfect illustration. I want to go back to you for a second on the name of the book, but it's exactly what C.S. Lewis used to say, right? We read to know we're not alone. And sometimes you read and you go, hey, wait a minute, I'm not the only person that's gone through whatever, fill in the blank, right? So the name of that book again that you're currently reading is?
The name of that book is So You Want to Talk About Race. So You Want to Talk About Race. And it talks about racial conflict in America from a diverse perspective, which would not be my perspective on it. So it's been really interesting and helpful for me. Of course, it's Black History Month, and I'm also reading Maya Angelou. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I'm listening to that, which is actually on Audible in her voice, which is so amazing. And then the other book I'm reading is this book was given to me 2 years ago, and I am such a self-help book person that I never got around to reading it, but my kids gave it to me, one of my daughters, and she said, you really will love this book. I really want you to read it. And I love that my daughters are readers, and we exchange books and they host book clubs. In fact, So You Want to Talk About Race came from a different daughter of mine. So I love it that we have that sort of family experience together. And anyway, the other book is Where the Crawdads Sing. Now that's a nonfiction book, but it's, is it fiction? It's not true. So it's a book that's just a story that's really amazing one. So I'm working on that right now.
Great. So you're only reading about 5 books at a time. That's what you're saying.
Right. Always. And I'm listening, usually listening. I mean, I am always reading like about 5 different things at a time. Yep. And usually they're related to different things, but I just really, I enjoy it. And I'm, I'm not the person that, like some people might say, well, I would read, but I don't have time to. Are you kidding me? I raised 4 children and I traveled around the world and I ran billion-dollar companies and I found the time to read. Now, I may not read, 500-page novels or whatever, but I could fit it in the nooks and crannies of my time. Like I talked about, my favorite thing to do is to listen, speed reading by listening on 1.5 speed on Audible when I'm walking the dogs. And that helps me crunch through quite a bit. But then also, I just make the time, like that kind of miracle morning thing where you make the time in the morning that you set your day before the day takes control of you. And I prioritize a little bit of my reading. I might read a little bit at nighttime before I go to sleep. So I just fit it in. So I believe anybody can fit it in if they want to.
Absolutely. And it makes such a difference. And sometimes, I know this with the Holy Bible, obviously, sometimes you pick it up and whatever that situation is, oh, there it is. For whatever reason, you pick up that I happened the other day, I picked up the Bible and I'm reading about in James, and it was exactly what was going on in my house that day. And it helped me to deal with it. But sometimes, to your point, I'll pick up anything, I'll pick up one of, the Seasons of Life, Mr. Robbins' book, or anything. And you go, a 2-minute read sometimes makes a huge difference in a day. So you're absolutely right. Hey, tell everybody about your podcast. So we'd certainly like them to take a listen to that as well.
Sure, I will. And before I end that, I will say that the secret for me to being able to read through the Bible in a year is that free app, the YouVersion app. The YouVersion app, you can listen to or read the Bible in any translation. And I love the Message translation. It's just very contemporary for me. And you can even cross-reference, like you can listen to something in the Message and then change it over to the New James and whatever. But there are Bible reading. There's tons of plans on there. It's all free. And you can choose a plan that pushes a couple of chapters to you every day. So for like 5 minutes a day, you could read through the whole Bible in a year. And that definitely is what made the difference for me with that. And as far as the podcast is concerned, well, an author that you might know of, Janine Finney, author of the Flip Flop CEO and Does the Shoe Fit, who was a cynic about the network marketing business because of a bad experience that she had. And oftentimes that's the case. But her daughter, really persuaded her to take another look at it. And they ended up, her journey, they wrote a book about all the objections, addressing the objections you run into to network marketing. Well, Janine and I co-host MLM You Decide podcast. We launched it last year, and folks love to listen to it in the sense that it helps them gain confidence about the industry because we have some great guests everywhere from lawyers to owners of companies to investors in companies to field leaders, very much like what you're doing, John. And we explore how they got introduced to the industry, the legitimacy of the industry. It's not as much training as it is that this industry is real. It's the good and the misunderstood about multi-level marketing and network marketing. And we tackle a lot of topics such as, is this a pyramid scheme? And how do you address that? And, products are overpriced so that they can pay the field. And obviously coming from a corporate side, I understand how to explain that to folks. So that's the podcast. You can find it anywhere where podcasts are. We're also on Clubhouse hosting a room as well every Tuesday at noon. So the podcast is MLM You Decide. And it's on all the streaming places, but also on YouTube.
Great. Well, wow. I can't wait to listen to it. Laura, this has been a privilege. So just to wrap up, folks, my name is John Solleder, and the conversations that we have are based on a book called Leave Nothing to Chance. The podcast is on Leaving Nothing to Chance. Somebody else unfortunately owned Leave Nothing to Chance. So Leaving Nothing to Chance is where you'll find the podcast. But if you're listening to this, you probably already know that. Our books are available on Amazon. There's 2 books there right now that have been bestsellers in the MLM category, small business category, and other numerous categories. Leave Nothing to Chance is our most recent with my co-author, Foster Owusu from Toronto, Canada. Canada. And my prior one is called Moving Up 2020 with my co-author, Keith Hooper from California. So you can acquire them there. They're digital if you want to read them on your devices. And also they are bilingual. They are 100% in Spanish also if you have Spanish downline or Spanish folks that you want to, once again, introduce to the industry. So Laura, this has been a privilege, my friend. So thank you again. Anything last thing you want to say?
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time to reconnect with you, John. And I'm so glad that you're doing so well.
Thank you, Laura. You too.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Solleder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.